Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. The Tenpenny Files isn't just another podcast. I hold daily discussions with guests whose research has discovered evidence that challenge official narratives that we commonly see in the headlines. Topics span the spectrum from national government, history, astronomy, and travel, to food and fitness, to health and health policy and vaccines. And we talk to authors who write about faith and biblical principles. I want to introduce you to topics that you've never heard of before, or topics you always wish you had more time to explore. For listeners ready to question the stories they've been told, the Tenpenny Files is a show for you. Join me here every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, to hear from authors and documentary filmmakers who have something important to say but have been silenced or censored. And before I introduce you today's guest, I want to introduce my listeners to the Tenpenny Prime membership. You will benefit from monthly white paper, a pre-recorded presentation, and an Ask the Expert masterclass that is just golden. To find out more, go to primemembership.drtenpenny.com, click on the membership tab to learn more about it and hopefully to join us. Today's conversation is with my guest, philosophy professor, campus minister, and CEO of Ratio Christi, Corey Miller, to talk about his book, The Progressive Miseducation of America, an eye-opening look of how universities have polluted the cultural landscape that we live in today. Corey, welcome so much to the Tenpenny Files. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It is so great to be back here with you again. Different platform, but you again.
Oh, thank you so much. In your book, The Progressive Miseducation of America, you start by saying that we are in the midst of an ideological revolution and have a choice to make. What does that really mean?
Well, we are definitely in a cultural revolution. Everyone can see and feel what the ground is below is shaking, and you're seeing this on the political landscape, for example, where now in the Republican platform, you have recent Democratic presidential candidates, multiples of them. You've got people like Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner, who ran for the California gubernatorial race, supported by the RNC. There's all kinds of new alliances building between old lines of Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, because there's something else, another ideology that has infiltrated our culture, starting at the universities, but moving into the corporate world, into K through 12 media, and even into the church world.
Wow. And so, what are the decisions and choices that we have to be making right now as a community and as a country?
I think first we have to figure out what is going on. People realize that this is no longer grandma's America. They can see that this is vastly a different place than just 5 years ago. Go back 15 years. People that are Gen Z, they are born in a completely different country. And it's not just technology, the ideology, the stuff that we are consuming and then further producing is new to them. We live in what some have said is an assassination culture today. We're seeing that on increasing numbers and large numbers, scads of people supporting that, and a really high level of people from the government on down that embrace socialism. And socialism killed 100 million of its own people. So the fact that it's here is a really odd thing. So in my book, I basically say, this is no longer grandma's America. I give tons of anecdotal illustrations that people resonate with. And I say, what just happened to the country? You can point to the universities. Well, how did that happen? I say two ideological revolutions, and I map that out since we started the universities as Christians. And then in the final part of the book, I say, well, what can we do about this? Being able to look at how it happened is a clue on how to turn the ship around before it's too late.
You talk a lot in your book about the impacts of DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. How have these impacted universities and how has it weakened our society?
Yeah, so if we go back a little bit and we look at how we launched the universities, beginning with the Puritans, about 6 years after they land, they start Harvard University with its motto being Veritas, or truth. And within a short period of time, that gets changed to Truth for Christ and the Church, lasting 300 years till 1936. Up until about 1840, every college president was also a member of the clergy. Till 1880, church and chapel attendance were still required. These places were pumping out clergy. They were changing the world because even though someone says what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and I have my doubts, what happens in the university does not stay in the university. As go the universities, so goes the culture. And so what happened at this point in around 1880 is we didn't have any PhD programs. We sent our people over to Germany, largely to Europe, but Germany being the most educated country in the history of the world at the time. We sent them there. And your listeners might think of big names like Nietzsche or Freud or Einstein or Immanuel Kant. We remember him because you can't know ultimate reality. Or Friedrich Schleiermacher, the father of modern liberal theology, or Karl Marx. All of this stuff is coming out of Germany, and the ideas are prevalent there. Our graduates would come back, and from 1880 to 1930, the battle was on. And they took over Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Columbia, and all the rest. And we had to start a new movement of universities like Westminster and Calvin and Biola and Wheaton and schools like that. Right as the dust was settling in the 1930s, this new thing was happening in Germany, again, called the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. We hear about critical race theory now, critical queer theory, critical gender theory, critical pedagogy, critical everything if it's Marxism plus some or other topic. And these critical theorists, these Marxists, were also Jewish, most of the leaders, and they were globalists or anti-fascist, Antifa, that's who they were. And it was the National Socialists, still socialist, but nationalist, with an anchor towards blue eyes and blonde hair. They won. And the critical theorists, the Marxists, had to get out of there. They left and they went over to America, to Columbia, to Brandeis, to UCLA, and so forth. And a long story short, they took us through the 60s and they had this big game plan, the long march through the institutions. And that's what's happened. And they are responsible for now this second revolution. And this is where ultimately this DEI, or as I would call it, DIE, comes from. And that's what's been able to spread from the humanities over to the hard sciences and medicine and engineering and mathematics, and then out into the corporate world and so forth. And so I guess I'll pause there for a moment because I've talked a lot before getting into what the DIE really stands for and why I cash it out that way rather than DEI.
Do you think Trump's executive order to stop using DEI has made any difference?
Yes, it has some. I mean, even the Supreme Court that he had helped facilitate from his first term ultimately came to fruition and slapped Harvard and University of North Carolina on the hand for being racist in their admissions policies, right? And then a lot of the other universities saw that, and a lot of the corporate world saw that, and then Trump gets in and he reverses a lot of what Biden did, and he starts to really fundamentally push back on DEI or DIE with transgenderism in sports and then this cultural Marxism. It has had some effect. At the same time, Sherri, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. When he came into office, Harvard at the time had 100 DIE officers who that was their 40-hour-a-week job, is to flush that stuff through the system. I guarantee you those people have not lost their jobs. And I know what the universities are doing. They're busy putting things under the carpet, ready to come out when things are mature again. They're changing the names of things. It's a shell game and shuffle. So until we do institutional recapture, we're not going to see substantial change. And if we continue to think that all of our efforts ought to go downstream to politics, well, again, politics is not where it comes from. It's like pouring chlorine into a cesspool of murky water, and you dump a big dump truck back there, and you can suddenly see the ground for about 15 seconds. But on the 16th second, it's murky again. And the reason why is you got to look upstream. And so politics is downstream from culture, culture from education, and the apex of education is the university. It's where our K through 12 educators are coming from. Even our Christian K through 12 educators are more often than not coming from there. So we have got to do something about the source and not treat the symptoms.
You know, you said in your book, and I think it may have been even in a previous conversation that we had, that the Bible inspired 75% of the first 120 universities in America, and that students used to have to, it was requirement to take, biblical history and biblical studies, and that doesn't even exist anymore. How do we take back our universities and put that back into play?
Yeah, for example, Harvard in 1636, its motto was Veritas. Freshmen were required to take Hebrew. And in the 17th century, the vast majority of people who graduated became pastors or missionaries.
Wow.
Harvard last 2 months ago hired a drag queen professor named Lahore Vajinistan
Oh my gosh.
from Pakistan with the name Lahore, you get it, Vajinistan. Then, as Harvard began to drift, it went to Yale. Some of the faculty, conservative faculty, went down there with some innovative businessmen, started afresh. Lux et Veritas was the motto: light and truth, God's presence, God's salvation, God's favor. And today you have in the divinity school, Lynn Tonstad with her mohawk, a lesbian, who has a book called Queer Theology, where she tells her students, this is an entire course she teaches, is not going to be about theology at all. It's going to be about queer theory, critical queer theory, and they're going to be exploring queering God and queering Christianity. That's not just Yale, that's Yale Divinity School. And then, of course, Yale pumped out one of the greatest child prodigies, American theologian Jonathan Edwards, who went down the road and started, he became the Princeton Theological Seminary's president. And today at Princeton, where I'll be lecturing in about 2 or 3 weeks, has a notorious, perhaps the most notorious moral philosopher alive, Peter Singer, who not only has a book called The Unsanctifying of Human Life, showing that if God is dead, then there is no sanctity of human life, but following that, he endorses sex with animals so long as it's mutually consensual and there's no harm inflicted on the animal.
Oh my goodness.
And so we could go on and on and on. These schools have not just been taken over by scientific naturalism in the first ideological revolution, but with the second one, with postmodern cultural Marxism, it's become just radical skepticism, radical Marxism, radical relativism, and various viewpoints that all unite on one thing, and that's the subversion of Christianity. And so there has to be ways. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be like storming the beaches of Normandy to get back on the mainland. And it's not just campus ministries who are going to be on the outsides of these things, but we need to be able to do what the Marxists have done in their game plan, and that is the long march through the institutions. And the cultural Marxists spelled it out. They said that this is going to take a long time and that they need to ensconce themselves into academia, media, and ecclesia, the churches. And once they were sufficiently ensconced in those, then the more formal revolution could begin. So what we're seeing right now in our culture is not the formal revolution. This is the soft revolution, not the hard revolution. It's what was coming from the universities yesterday. It's what's in the universities today that's coming tomorrow. And so we've got to have a way. And one of the things that Ratio Christi, my ministry, does is we fund top-notch PhD students that are Christians, that they get heavily vetted, and we give them awards, financial awards, to launch chapters at the top 100 universities so that they are the first ones to get jobs when the job market comes open. But their main job is to start PhD, Christian PhD student only ministries where they are focused on integration and infiltration, integrating faith and reason, faith and life, faith and vocation, and then, like spies, going behind enemy lines, infiltrating the universities that we Christians started. We can either do that or we can just throw in the towels because the Bible says train them up in the way they should go, and when they get older, they get conscripted to work for the other side.
Hmm,
That's not what it really says, but that's what's happening.
that's
And I hear this from parent after parent after parent. I just really quick. I have one recent anecdotal story. I was doing a team teaching down in Houston with a guy that I highly respect, and he had me on his podcast. And in both places, he confirmed what my book says, and he said, by the way, he's one of the top 10 chemists in the world, top 50 most influential scientists. He said, I grew up with my 4 kids, raising them at 5:30 a.m. in the morning. We would do devotions every single morning. But when they went off to the university, even with my background in science and taking my parenting that seriously, only 2 of them came back. The other 2 had their worldviews rocked. One did return later, the other has yet to return. The philosophical subtleties at the university and the sheer numeric volume of professors that are left to right is astounding. Once you hear the numbers, you're thinking, what in the world, is there any hope? But there is.
When I hear stories like this, and I think about what you just described as happening at Harvard, I think about what the parents are paying for in these indoctrination centers. Do they know that they're paying for their kids to go to school to be taught by drag queens? Do they know?
I don't think they have any idea of the level of corruption that is happening at the university level. And most parents want their kids to go to the Ivy League schools. And yet the statistics from liberal to conservative in the 90s was 2.3 to 1. That's still severe, but you still have checks and balances, and no one can get away with saying just anything without someone calling them on it. But today it's 12 to 1 for those who are retirement age, 23 to 1 for those who are just getting tenure and having 40 years ahead of them, 27 to 1 in the Ivy League schools, and in some departments it's 70 to 1. Yale just a few months ago reported that in their humanities and social sciences, it's 78 to 1. So for parents who do not equip their kids, or for our churches who do not equip the parents to help equip the kids, they are literally paying for the apostasy of their own children. And so people might think, well, gosh, then we should avoid the secular universities. And I say, yeah, but have you seen the Christian universities?
Exactly.
You can't escape this stuff. Remember, this revolution was intentionally seeking to infiltrate, and it has, into the seminaries, the churches, the Christian academic societies, and campus ministries, et cetera, et cetera. Some better, some worse, but it's everywhere. The barbarians are no longer at the gates; they're in the citadel. And so, even when you look at, the pastoral flock across the country, Arizona Christian University puts out a worldview inventory every year, letting us know, the statistics on how many people hold to a biblical worldview. And they've got about 7 markers for that, like God exists, Jesus is the only way, the Bible is true and all that it affirms, etc. Things that you would think are common sense if you're a serious apprentice of Jesus. And it turns out that in 2022, only 6% of Americans hold to a biblical worldview. The next year, it dropped down to 4%. For pastors, it's 37%. But if you call up evangelical and non-denominational pastors, it's between 51 to 57%. And the number goes down when you're talking about youth pastors and things like that. So for parents not to take this seriously and to think that the youth pastor, because the parents are now both 2-income homes, they're working, they're exhausted, to think that the youth pastor or the pastor is going to raise their kids and prepare them. First of all, it's not going to happen. Not likely. And second, the Bible gives the prerogative, the primary job is to the parents. Well, how do I have so much time on my hands? I'm exhausted. And how do I combat all these things that the PhDs are saying? That's where people need to network and be in touch with ministries that can provide concise, bite-sized chunks on a plethora of different topics that can quickly equip for battle. And so, Ratio Christi, we've got a high school division, we've got a college division, a PhD, and a professor's division. And then we have a press that pumps out over 60 different booklets by some of the top scholars in the country on science, on scripture, on suffering, and on race, class, sex, gender, ethnicity, and so forth. So, the people who are writing the 200, 300, and 500 page books, we've got them to write 25-page books at the 11th grade reading level, both printable and digital. So they're all there. And if they go to our website, they're actually free in PDF form anyway for download. If you want them to fit on your iPhone, it's a small nominal fee of about $2. And then you can print them out, use them in your Sunday schools, use them in your homes, use them in your small groups, but use them, use them, use them, because we are facing a severe, severe problem.
Yeah, and your website for that is ratiochristi.org. I want to say that for the listeners so that if the people that are interested in that could go to that. Those numbers that you just rattled off there, Corey, were just shocking. To think that Christians don't have Christian worldviews. I mean, that's like an oxymoron somehow. It just doesn't, how does that exist? And are all of these things that are, and we've heard stories for years now of parents that, like you were talking about, that person that raised their kids at 5:30 in the morning, they did devotions. We've heard stories for years of parents who say, I raised my children in a Christian home and in a good Bible teaching school, and they went to summer camps and all that. They went off to college and they came home and they said, who are you and what happened, what did they do to my child? And it happens almost, the indoctrination happens almost straight up, where they just say, if you came in here with this Christian worldview, we're going to make sure you leave without it. I mean, I've heard stories that the professors actually say that. So is Christianity being taken over by this lack of cultural morality that we're now seeing in our country?
Yeah, I mean, Antonio Gramsci, one of the probably most dangerous cultural Marxists, said that until the West is de-Christianized, uh, capitalism will never go away, and that was just one of their issues. But you've got Marxists now writing books titled "Abolish the Family," right? And you think back about before BLM scrubbed their website, they talked about their view of the family as well. Marx had a view of the family, and it is everything subversive of the Christian faith, and it has infiltrated not just academia now, but it is in our culture, it's in our campus ministries, and it's in our churches and so forth. So, there are other people who have come alive to this new current cultural revolution who are not Christians either. But they are sympathetic now to the Christian viewpoint, at least practically speaking. For example, you have Elon Musk, who is a lifelong Democrat, was worried about free speech and started, bought X or Twitter, as it were. He is a transhumanist. He's not a Christian, but now he calls himself a cultural Christian. Richard Dawkins, the Ivan Terrible of the New Atheist movement, who has now been canceled himself and had the Humanist of the Year award stripped from him after 25 years by the woke left, because he dared compare transgenderism to the possibility of transracialism. If a man can say that he is trapped in a woman's body, or someone says I'm a man trapped in a woman's body, or vice versa, why can't a black person or a white person claim the same about race and transspeciesism and transableism? And these are all real cases too. You can Google this stuff and look up this diversity of dysphoria. This is all part of the postmodern worldview where knowledge is a social construction of reality. All knowledge that includes personal identity so that you can literally be anything you want when you grow up. Anything.
Herding a rabbit, right? So,
Yeah.
so that thought right there, Corey. We're going to take a quick break for our sponsors for AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Radio plays the Tenpenny Files on the iHeartRadio network daily, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can also listen anywhere in the world by going to AmericaOutloud.news and plugging into their media player. And if you've missed any of these great conversations we've been having on a whole plethora of different information, you can find the Tenpenny Files on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studio, and on my platforms on X and also on Rumble. And we host them on our website at drtenpenny.com underneath the podcast tab. There's so many great books and so many great documentaries and so little time to really read and watch that we're hoping that this show will maximize your time and jumpstart your interests. We have a great message coming up from our sponsors. Sit tight. Please listen. Sit tight. We'll be right back. More with Corey Miller on his book, The Progressive Miseducation of America. We'll be right back.
Zeolite is a detox spray. We work specifically with a company called Touchstone Essentials. They are an incredible company. We've been working with them now for several years. And zeolite is a mineral that goes through your body like a one-way basket. It will clean out heavy metals such as arsenic and mercury, aluminum, cadmium, and it hooks onto those metals from a one-way perspective. So once it's bound, it goes out through your urine or your stools and doesn't get redeposited in other places. Everybody needs to have a detox product in their life, and this one is so easy to use and it's so safe. You can take it when you're pregnant, you can take it when you're nursing, you can give it to little children, you can even give it to infants, and quite frankly, I give it to my dog. I actually put a little bit of the zeolite in his water because until we all stop living in a toxic world, we all need to get some of those extra toxicities out. The heavy metals, the persistent organic pollutants, the things that are floating through the air, the different things that we come in touch with in our environment. And we are a big fan of zeolite from Touchstone Essentials. We've been a big fan of their products for several years. Go to drtenpenny.com/detox to get your first bottle of zeolite spray for $50 off.
Well, only when the government bows to the people will America become great again. This is Malcolm Out Loud here. Join me in pushing back against censorship, my fellow Americans. Right at the top of AmericaOutloud.news are the words, many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news, liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Corey Miller is here to talk about his book, The Progressive Miseducation of America, an eye-opening look at how our universities have polluted the cultural landscape we live in today. Let me tell you a little bit more about today's guest, Corey Miller. Corey grew up in Utah as a seventh-generation Mormon. He authored and edited 5 books and holds 3 master's degrees along with a PhD from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. He came to Christ and later became a pastor, philosophy professor, and campus minister. He now serves as CEO of Ratio Christi, which is ratiochristi.org. We've already talked about that a little bit. So welcome back to the show, Corey. You write about a virtuous victimology and viewpoint diversity. What are those and how do they impact our society?
Well, yeah, I went on tour with an atheist philosopher a couple of years ago. He was my arch rival when it comes to God's existence. He wrote the book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. And he invited me to lecture in his 300 level course on atheism at Portland State University, and then trained his kids to take me down after. So it was a fun time for all, and we went to lunch after. And then he proposed an alliance. And we decided, I first told him, well, remember, I see the problem that you see. We both see something coming down the pipeline very quickly, And we're both opposites, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and we have a job to do right now as allies. As strange as it sounds. And so I said, remember, your side is the one that caused this. And he later admitted it, said that him and Dawkins and Sam Harris and other new atheists talked about the possibility that if they destroyed the gods of the West or the God of the West, that some other god or gods would take its place, but they never had any idea how bad it would become. And now he said, I'm done with the atheism-theism debates. I'm dedicating my career to the destruction of social justice, of critical theory, because this is about civilization. So together we launched at 4 universities in Utah. We were going to go on to from there to Texas and then to others. Our talk was on viewpoint diversity, the death of intellectual diversity in the universities. And so as your listeners have heard the large disparate statistics about how many left to right professors are there, it's not just left to right, it's new left, it's hard left. It's Marxist left that have often pushed out people like the Richard Dawkins types, and that's why many in the Democrat Party have gone into the Republican Party, even though they're still liberal, or why many of these atheist liberals have now been partnering with conservative Christians, because this new revolutionary spirit is not liberal, it's illiberal, it's Stalinist. Remember that Voltaire, the deist, once said that I may disagree with what you say, but I would defend to the death your right to say it. Stalin comes along and he says, ideas are more powerful than weapons. We don't allow our enemies to have weapons, so why should we let them have ideas? This is the heart of cancel culture. And so what happens? We land at our first university, Utah State, where Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin started his education. And we had a group there write an open letter to the president trying to get us kicked off the campus before we'd even begun, to get us canceled because they called us logical fascists. And then we went on to the next university and the next, and we got boycotted essentially by a Christian campus ministry who was afraid that we were going to burn bridges with marginalized minority groups. And instead of coming and listening to viewpoint diversity by a conservative Christian and a liberal atheist talking about free speech and the First Amendment and intellectual diversity, if there's any kind of diversity at the universities, it shouldn't be skin pigment and body parts. It should be the competition of the free exchange of ideas. And instead, he decides to have his whole campus ministry watch a video on white guilt. And then from there, we ended our tour at Utah Valley University, the place where Charlie Kirk was there doing open dialogue and engagement on the free exchange of ideas and was assassinated. So this viewpoint diversity is something that will not be tolerated by the new left. The old left at least gave lip service to it, and now many of them appreciate it and want to join an alliance. And so alliances have strange bedfellows, and you're starting to see that in our culture because the Marxist infiltration has begun in earnest, and some of those who didn't get conscripted have now seen it and have moved to the other side, and we've got a really strange predicament happening in the country right now. This business about virtuous victimology, then, we prize the victim mentality in this new movement. One thinks about, and we call it a virtue in the sense that if you can, craft as part of your testimony that you are a victim or a victim intersectionally at multiple layers, then you get exalted, promoted, and get a platform to speak and to transform. And so what this is, again, to show to kind of illustrate for your viewers where this comes from, under classical Marxism, there was the idea of the haves and the have-nots, right? Economically speaking. You were part of the bourgeoisie or the proletariat, the working class or the elite class, ruling everything and enslaving everybody else. And all inequality was injustice. Today, with the neo-Marxist movement, the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory and so forth, it has broadened that to include the sexuality of Freud, but to go on to race, class, sex, gender, ethnicity, and so forth. So it's now not just haves and have-nots economically, but it's victim and victimizer, oppressed and oppressor on those categories of race, class, sex, gender, etc. And so if you are on the side of the oppressed, as it were, that is an inequality that simply entails injustice. And they say that everybody, this is diversity, this is the D in DIE, everybody is part of these groups of social groups, identity politics, identity powers, haves and have-nots, victims, victimizers, and so forth. And you move up to the next level, where I comes in, inclusivity. They want to include those who are in the know, who are woke, whose eyes have opened up. And the only way they have eyes to see and ears to hear is if they've come from the oppressed. The others are just blind. And so what you do is give a morally authoritative voice to a black against a white, a female against a male, a lesbian against straight, a trans against cis, etc., etc. You exalt them, platform them, give them job status and influence, and you exclude all the oppressor groups. And that's why all the young boys are having a hard time finding jobs and finding meaning in life right now. They feel like they've just been beaten down. That's another story. We can get there. But then comes the E, D-I-E, corresponding to the three major branches of philosophy. What is real? How do I know what is real? How should I then live based on what I know about reality? The E is equity, and this is social justice. If the problem is inequality, social oppression, the solution is social liberation, identity politics, social justice. It's reparations, revenge, payback, and so forth. That's what DIE is, and those words sound nice, and it's because of the nice sounding words how they ended up jumping tracks from the humanities to the hard sciences, and then into the corporate world, into the HR departments, and then into the K through 12 and into the churches and so forth. The Christians, we bleed all over ourselves because we believe in original sin and that God hates sin and he hates oppression. And then we come to believe that sin just is oppression. And we say, well, God is love. And what would Jesus do? And love is love. Whether it comes, it's like water, right? Whether it comes from the tap or the toilet. No, love actually means something. It means to will the good of the other. But they have us confused and they say hate or celebrate. And suddenly all the Christians start putting rainbows in their businesses and their churches. And, you know, their kids are coming home from middle school and saying, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter? You choose. And so all the rhetoric is there for this new movement as well. And it explains why so many previously conservative Christian parents and grandparents, just to hold on to a shoestring of that relationship, start to move toward progressivism, just to hold on to the relationship. This is how deep this revolution has gone and how impactful it is, and why everybody needs to open up their eyes and pay attention and to prepare.
You know, there's another element to this. And, you know, excuse me, I told you earlier that I had a conversation with Priscilla West about her book about the new woke education. And she put a lot of emphasis on social emotional learning and how the social emotional learning has just infiltrated everything and has gotten coupled in with Common Core. It's got coupled in with it's in the SAT tests, the ACT tests. It's everywhere. It's even you know, how do you feel today is if you get an A or an F, and it is infiltrated into all elements of education, starting with kindergarten, and that the kids that are now going to college to become teachers aren't really going to college to become teachers. They're there to become activists, you know, to be able to weave this social emotional learning. And it's even, excuse me, it's even in the hard sciences like physics and math. It's even into the trade schools, like when you're going to become a plumber or electrician. Do you see that in your work and the things that you're doing, the
Yeah.
social learning woven in with the DEI stuff?
Yeah, it's no longer just like the National Endowment of the Arts that we have to worry about that had, Jesus on a crucifix in a bottle of urine, calling it art. Now it's in the NIH and it's in math and medicine and in medical schools and so forth. This stuff, that's why I'm saying we are in a revolution. A revolution doesn't always come with tanks and guns, but as Mao told us, a revolution is not a dinner party. This is a soft revolution. It's a cultural revolution, and they are seeking to ensconce themselves into academia, media, and ecclesia, and they're doing a pretty good job. We're putting up a good fight, and there's a new alliance building, but it is a fight. My daughter is a education major for elementary ed at Purdue University, and I ask her every semester for her syllabi for all of her courses because I can spot this stuff. I can smell this stuff. And I can see it right there, Sherri. It's there in some of the classes that she is teaching or that she is taking. So suppose we think, oh yes, so we should just get our kids out of the government schools. We should send them to Christian schools. She's a Christian under the home of a philosopher and theologian who can spot this stuff and has been peer-reviewed, published on this stuff. And if she goes off to a Christian school, she's got the fortune of being able to be trained by someone like myself. How many parents have that kind of a background? And so we send our kids off to the secular baptismal font and then want them to come back and teach at a Christian school in the local neighborhood. They're going to be taking this stuff with them to the local Christian schools as well. And I don't think it's just merely, then let's just isolate and just homeschool forever and lock ourselves into our nuclear silos, waiting for the world above to, be destroyed. And once all the radiation's gone, then we come back up and restart civilization. No, we need to have the battle now, and we can, and we must. There are ways to counteract this stuff. Look, the fact that there has been one revolution that toppled the majority when we started all the universities to begin with shows that it can happen. And then the second revolution is now in the process of pushing out the old guard, the scientific naturalists, and they're taking over, which again demonstrates that it can happen. I interviewed someone like Al Mohler at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, who was given a liberal seminary, and he institutional recaptured that seminary and made it conservative. It can happen. We have examples like Alvin Plantinga, one of the top philosophers in the world currently, who behind him, he left a wake of philosophy societies, philosophy departments, to the point where some have said that perhaps 1/3 of all philosophers in the subfield of philosophy of religion today that argues for and against God's existence are conservative Christians. So we can do this at institutions, in academic disciplines. We just have to have a coalition. We have to be very intentional about it. And as parents and pastors, we need to start preparing how the Bible delegated to us. The pastors have to stop being consumed with skinny jeans and fog machines and instead be consumed with Ephesians 4:11 and 12, equipping their flock, and not getting it from sociology and culture, but from theology and scripture and some healthy Christian philosophy. We and other ministries help do that. And parents, likewise, we write this stuff at the 11th grade reading level. And if you're looking to get your kids involved in a group, we do that too with respect to the Christian schools or secular schools at the high school level or at the college level. Join us on the campuses or send your students to one of our campuses or fund us or other ministries like us rather than funding these universities. Stop funding those who hate you and seek to subvert your worldview. Fund those who align with you. This is a real battle.
The re-engineering of society of what's happening right now. I mean, look at what's happening in Minnesota, what's happened on the West Coast in the whole state of Oregon, in Seattle, and then Los Angeles. And we see these pockets of social re-engineering that's going on. How do we take everything that you're talking about that's happening at the university level and looking at it on a larger scale of what's happening across the country? What is the end game that what these people really want? I mean, why are they burning down buildings and throwing bottles at people? What, if they could, if say, okay, uncle, we give, you win,
Yeah.
rewrite it. What would they write? What did they want it to look like?
They want socialism, pure and simple. And it is, not everybody will call it that, but that doesn't mean it's not that. Just like not all Christians can articulate, or read the Bible, but they've
And
sort of just consumed it throughout the years, and they assume these biblical principles like equality and the sanctity of human life. But outside of God, they don't have any rational ground for that. So these people are all about throwing off the shackles of the Christian worldview, and even the progressives, the progressive Christians, who are voting in the same political way as the atheists and agnostics. They are, like Lenin called them, useful idiots, sort of working for the other side, right? I mean, when Germany fell to Nazism, we have photographs of the churches when they would baptize babies in these German churches. They would wrap them in a cloth, and it was a swastika cloth. Here, it happens to be just a hammer and a sickle instead, right? But it's happening. But Marx and Lenin and Mao, they never knew what the end game was or how to really get there. It was simply utopia. The Beatles sing about it in their song Imagine, right? Imagine no heaven or hell, no religion, no private property, no country, no borders. One of the most famous songs ever. We have songs about it, and it's this great utopic vision that we're not going to have poverty anymore. We're going to share all things in common. And they don't know how to get there. They're good at destruction, not good at construction, and they're trying to destroy the West and America right now.
well, obviously, they're not very good at reading either, because if they looked at any socialist society in history that we have written records of, they know that it doesn't work and it fails. Do
It's
they
just never really been tried, Sherri. That's what they say.
even really understand what the definition of socialism would be? Or do they think it will apply to everybody else but not to them?
The masses simply think it's all about equality and it's meeting everybody's needs, and that's love, and we don't need religion for that. And besides, have you seen how bad religion is? In the name of Christ, all these bad things happen, and in the name of Allah, 9/11, religion is horrible. We need humanism of some sort. So that kind of drives it. It's an ideological revolution, upending an old worldview and bringing in the new one. Again, some from the left, some from the atheist and liberal left are seeing this, and they're saying, even Dawkins calls himself a cultural Christian. Jordan Peterson, an existentialist Christian. Elon Musk, a cultural Christian. But they think, they're doing this now because they can finally see in a macro level, because now society is radically starting to change, that this is not just theory, and they're saying, I don't like what I'm seeing. I'd probably rather go back. And so Richard Dawkins even says, when it comes to Islamism or Marxism, I'm on Team Christian every day. The problem is for even some of these liberals or atheists or agnostics who don't want to succumb to this new revolutionary spirit, they think that they can have the fruit of Western civilization without the root. They think they can consume these tasty apples that we've had for centuries and millennia, and just buy them at the supermarket indefinitely without the root that they come off of certain trees. And this is where Christians come in, and this is what I push in my book, showing it's no longer Grandma's America. Here's how it happened, and here's what we need to do to respond. I say that we need to be able to show people that Christianity is good for the world, not just good for the next life. It's good for the world now, that it's reasonable, and that it's true. This is the field of Christian apologetics. This is the church repenting for what we've done in the last 100 years, and that is we excommunicated the head of Christ and retained only the hand and the heart of Christ. There have been books written on this called The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind, which is to say there isn't much of an evangelical mind. We need to follow Jesus again. The Sadducees approached him and he responded to them. The Pharisees thought they could come in and do one in on him. And he responded to their question, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your heart. No, and with all your mind. And Jesus said that the purpose of life in John 17:3 is to know God. Christianity is not a faith tradition, it's a knowledge tradition. For Pete's sakes, we started the universities. And for good reason. We begin with a mind and not matter. And that's why all the sciences started from Christians as well. We need to be able to focus on this stuff heavily and revive the life of the mind.
Corey, we have 1 minute left. I want you to just give a good sum up of the Progressive Miseducation of America, your book, in 1 minute.
As go the universities, so goes the culture. As goes the U.S. university, so goes the world.
And we need to take them back. Parents need to get involved with their education and know what their students are being taught. Where's the best place to buy your book, and how can people get involved with the work that you're doing with Ratio Christi?
They can simply go to drcorymiller.com. Corey is with an E. drcorymiller.com. From there, they can read part of the book for free. They can look at our booklets. They can find where we're out on campuses. They can gain access to our RC Press and so forth, or just go straight to ratiochristi.org as well. But I would encourage people, if churches or campuses or conferences, even men's ministries, if you want to have me out speaking on this, I'm on a 12 to 18 month speaking tour. I would be happy to come to your group and address these issues.
Well, Corey, thank you so much for your research, for your writing, and for your strong position for the Lord, the Bible, and Christianity, getting Christianity back into the universities, because you're right. We are on, we're on life support when it comes to education in this country, and your work is certainly helping to put it back on track of where it needs to be. So I hope that all of my listeners will go and get this book. It's an easy read. I mean, it's not, a super eggheady. You can read it easily. You will really like it and enjoy the book as I have. So Corey, I want to thank you so much for being with us here today. And with that, I want to close out with one of my favorite verses from the Bible. I close all my podcasts with, that you should know by now. Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in trouble. And be persistent in prayer. Lean into God. Trust Him for everything. He will never let you down. We'll see you here tomorrow or the next time on the Tenpenny Files. Have a great week, everybody. A great evening. Goodbye and God bless.